Hey gang, today I'm going to show you how to turn your food storage into something you can actually eat. Who all has this in their food storage? 100% hard white wheat berries. And you say to yourself, I bought all this stuff, how do I turn this into something I can actually use? Well, I'll tell you how. Today we're going to explore how to make this into amazing whole wheat bread that anybody can enjoy. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need after you get out your big old bag of wheat is a grinder. I highly recommend the Victorio VKP 1024A, which you can get on Amazon for about $65. It's a really great grinder. It can take your wheat and turn it either into cracked wheat or it down into flour for breads and things like that. It also comes with an optional motor for those of you who plan on having electricity when you make your own bread. And that's another like $60. We didn't do it because we thought, hey, we're pretty big and strong. We can grind our own wheat. It'll be easy. So this particular setup takes about 5 cups of wheat berries at a time. And I'm going to be able to turn this 5 cups of wheat berries into about 8 cups of flour. Now, the recipe that I'm going to be making for you today calls for 2.5 cups of flour, so you can get 3 or 4 loaves of bread out of just this one hopper full of wheat berries. Now, you load your hopper, you take the thickness wheel here, set it all the way to maximum, that's tighten it all the way up, and then untighten it just a little bit so you get the finest grain possible. And here comes the technical part. You grab this handle here, and you take a deep breath, and you start grinding clockwise. And if you can get a tight shot of this, you'll see that I'm turning the wheat berries from these big old grains that look like rice right into a nice light brown fine flour. Now, the reason I said you might invest in the motor is because this takes a while. It's going to end up taking probably 20-25 minutes to grind down this 5 cups of wheat into the finished product, which will be the 7 to 8 cups of flour. So get your kids involved, take turns, and you can have a lot of fun doing this if you make a game out of it. Now, one thing I found with this particular grinder is you have to watch. You see how it's starting to curve? You kind of have to hold it in place unless you can actually make the connection down here very good and tight against your countertop, which I can't because of the way my countertops were built. So you just grind away, and I'm going to keep doing this for a while, so we're going to cut off here and come back when that part of the job is done. So after a 20-minute workout, I managed to turn these 5 cups of wheat berries into 2 pounds of high-quality, grade A whole wheat flour. Now, you're going to notice that this flour is brown. That's because it is not the same as the enriched flour that you're buying in the stores. Nor is it the same as the self-rising flour that is out there also. That stuff is really not good for you. It's good in case of an emergency, but for all the nutrients that you can possibly get out of flour, the proteins and everything else, this is what you want to go with. Straight from the ground to your mouth. It's awesome, and it's the best flour you're going to get. It's a tiny bit more coarse than you're used to, but once we make the bread, you won't be able to tell the difference. That's what we're going to do next. Okay, so you've looked up the child labor laws in your state and made sure that all the grinding you had your kids doing doesn't violate anything. Took me about 20 minutes, like I said, to turn the wheat berries into flour, and now we're going to make the magic happen. It's a really simple recipe. It takes about 3 hours total time for the bread to actually be ready to eat, but in reality it's only about 20 minutes of your time to get it done. So let's go ahead and jump into it. First thing you're going to need is 1 cup of flour. And you just made that, so you should really feel good about yourself about doing that. 3 tablespoons of active yeast. Fleischmann's is a good brand if you have it. Now what I like to do before adding the rest of the ingredients is going ahead and mixing my dry ingredients together. That way I get a really good, thorough integration of the yeast into the wheat, which will help later with the fermenting process. Then you're going to use, where am I going here? 2.5 tablespoons of your favorite sweetener. In this case, I'm going with Grandma's Original Molasses. Yum. So we're going to add a little bit of sweetness to the bread. It doesn't add as much sweetness as you think. So we're going to put that in there on top of everything there. Like that. And last but certainly not least, 1 cup of warm water to let the yeast react. And the reason for the sweetener is that's what the yeast will actually feed off of in order to create the carbonation necessary to leaven the bread, as it were. So then you mix that together really good. If you can come in a little closer and see the mixing process here. Just get everything as wet as you can. And we're going to do this for 2 or 3 minutes before it's ready to be absolute. So I'm not going to bore you with the rest of the mixing that I'm doing here. I'm going to go ahead and set myself a 2-minute timer. But you want to really, really integrate everything very well done so that every bit of that yeast has a chance to come in contact with that sugar that you put in and create the carbon dioxide for the leavening. Now, after this, we're going to cover it and leave it alone in a nice warm place. In this case, I'm just going to leave it on the stove for about an hour to give it a chance to rise. So what you'll see at the end of this product is it's going to actually triple in volume of what we're doing here. So in just a couple of seconds, we'll come right back. All right, it's been an hour. So we come back, we uncovered it, and you'll see what sponge looks like. This is what happens when yeast mixes with sugar, warm water, and wheat. We get this nice, big, fluffy, wiggly looking thing that is going to be the core for our bread making. Now comes the actual bread making. To this, we're going to add, you see we have 2 cups of, don't ever go anywhere without your whisk, 2 more cups of the wheat flour. We're going to add a teaspoon of salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of cumin for a little bit of flavor. And we mix that in there real good so it gets around everywhere. And we're just going to dump that straight in here, like this. You're going to put that into your mixer bowl with a kneading hook. Come on here closer so you can see the kneading hook up close. This is a kneading hook. Don't use a mixer paddle because you're going to see why in just a couple of seconds. Put it down, lock it into place, and you're going to put it, if you have a KitchenAid, put it on 2 to mix. And as it starts mixing, you're going to see it starts clumping up. To that, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of water, 2 tablespoons of oil, and 1 teaspoon of lemon juice. Just going to pour that right in there. And we're going to set a 5-minute timer. Now, to make a long story short, we're going to let this mix together for 5 minutes, then let it rest for 5 minutes, and then we're going to use the kneading hook on it again for 8 more minutes until it becomes a nice big ball of fun. So we're going to pick that up back in a few minutes together. Alright, so we're back. So we let it beat for 5 minutes, rest for 5 minutes, and beat for another 8. The reason we did that is to get the gluten to set up. And now we have this, a little bit of a sticky mess, but you can tell it's going to be good because it's hard to break apart like that. You see that? So we take this giant thing, put it on a sheet of paper, and we're going to take it and stretch it out into a nice long sheet that's approximately the size of this pan right here. This pan is a 9x5 pan. So we take it and we stretch it out like this, and then we're going to roll it up this way into a log, like you've seen at the stores, that is going to fit nice and neat into this previously greased bread pan. I have smaller bread pans that are like 8x4, but this is actually going to create us a nice loaf of bread, so you want to make sure it's a 9x5 pan. Any bigger, it's going to create a small loaf. Any smaller, I can't tell you what it's going to do to the thing. So this is the easy part. After you roll it up, you stick it in here. Looks all nice and pretty. At this point, you can do one of two things. You can either spritz a little water onto it and put on sesame seeds or whatever you like on top of it, poppy seeds, whatever, or you can leave it alone. Your choice. But what we do now is we're going to take it and we're going to put a towel over it. I don't have a towel because I forgot to bring a towel. So for these purposes, I'm just going to drape this over right here. And we're going to let this sit for another hour. The reason we're doing that, we're letting the dough rise into its final form. For those of you who play Pokemon, it's evolution, okay? So the dough's going to rise, and you know it's ready to go when the timer goes off at an hour, and the dough will actually be above the pan. So see you in an hour. All right, it's been an hour. The towel has risen. So let's see what this loaf looks like. Come on in for a closer look. Look at that beautiful thing. Oh, that's looking really good. Okay, so at this point, you got your oven preheated to 350 degrees. We're going to take a little bit of olive oil and spritz it lightly on the top. The reason we do that is to get that nice golden brown look to the bread. So we're going to open our oven and we're going to put this in at 350 degrees for 40 minutes. We set our timer. And in 40 minutes, we're going to have the best tasting bread you've ever made in your whole life. See you then. All right, the time has come. The bread baked for 40 minutes, and I let it sit for 10 minutes after I got it out of the oven. For whatever reason, this thing decided to cave in the middle. I don't know why, but it did. But that's what happens with homemade bread. They're not always perfect. So, now comes the final test. Did we do it right? When you cut the bread, we're going to cut off the heel here. I've had homemade whole grain breads. The big problem with homemade whole grain breads is that they tend to crumble a lot when you cut it. You cut into it, you pick it up, and it basically just dissolves in your hand. So far, so good. Oh, it smells so good. Okay, so I'm leaving the heel for later because the heel is the fun part. We're going to see how thin a slice we can get without it shattering. Now that right there, my friends, is a nice thin sandwich slice. Look at that. You don't get a lot thinner than that. Actually, that's even thinner than store-bought. And as you can see, it's holding together very well. So it looks like the glutens in it actually paid off and did what they were supposed to do. And that's very important in bread making because you don't want a bread that is just for dipping in olive oil. That doesn't do anybody any good. So I'm putting a little bit of my daughter's soy butter on there. Let's see what this thing tastes like. You're going to love this bread recipe. It was easy. It's like 5 ingredients. The long part was waiting for everything to happen. But if you don't like it, you get your money back. Okay? So from me to you, happy eating.